Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of our NOS4A2 recap show titled NOS Recap 2. This is the show where we break down the latest episode of AMC's hit series based off of the novel by Joe Hill. I am, of course, one of your hosts, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Mike Johnson of Real School. Mike, how are you doing?
Good, buddy. We are this close to wrapping up season 2 now, so this is getting exciting.
Very close. As you can see, I'm thrilled. I've got a cocktail. So it's actually, maybe it's cocktaratu. I don't know how, that doesn't sound right. Nos.
You gotta be careful with that syllable.
Yeah. I'm like, what's going on here? I don't really know how to word it. But anyways, yes, why not? Why not? That's the way I say I put it. It's like, why not? Anyways, yes, we're going to be breaking down season 2, episode 8, titled Chris McQueen, aptly titled Chris McQueen. As always, guys, before we dive into this thing, we want to know what you all are thinking. So be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. Did you like the episode? Did it not quite work for you? What were some of the things that stood out to you? Maybe some shockers along the way. Obviously, this is a spoiler-centric recap show, so you are feel free to spoil everything down in the comment section below. It doesn't matter. We're going to be talking about it all regardless. But yeah, Mike, I guess going into this episode from last week's episode, we've had two phenomenally strong, well-written, well-directed, well-paced, structured, all that good stuff episodes. Two of the best in the series, and some that you thought were arguably the best 1-2 punch we've gotten all season.
Yeah.
So going into episode 8, there is a I guess there's a little bit of an expectation to sort of be at the same level as those previous 2 episodes. Now obviously it can fall slightly short, maybe it can go slightly above, but you want it to be around that same ballpark. So for you, do you think that it at least came close to matching the quality of the previous 2 episodes?
Ooh, I like how you use that word, because if you say quality instead of perhaps quantity of things that occur, or happenstances within the episode, quality, sure, I would say it's close. It is a very interesting episode, and crafted in a very particular manner, which is a very diplomatic way of saying, give it a chance until you get to the last 20 minutes. There's a fantastic payoff.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I'll say this, because I agree with you, but I will also say that the pre-title sequence to this episode was riveting, and I loved it.
It was interesting how long it went on. I think, it's so funny when we recap these shows, because I seem like a guy who has no attention span whatsoever, when really I can get through it. But it was interesting to me because for, a typical teaser for a television show was only about 2.5-3 minutes, and it kept going. And so then it makes you stop and think, if you know anything about the format of television or just the show itself, okay, why are they dwelling on this? What's this episode going to be all about? And to me as well, not to have the flashback cut at all, for it to be Chris for 5 minutes solid. And then more importantly, you start to think about, just the fundamentals of filmmaking. And to me, I started to notice, okay, so why does he only have a mustache, right? Obviously it's a flashback, but it was one of those, okay, he's got a mustache, so he shaved his beard. So what's going to happen? Where did we end up to get to this? It's just one of those things where I start to think, something's going to happen, right? For a lot of reasons. So yeah, it was interesting that the scene kind of kept going when they could have easily cut it down, I should say. But yeah, it was, they were doing all of that for a reason, obviously.
Yeah, it was a really nice acting showcase for Eben, who plays Chris. And again, I feel like we continuously praise him for the work that he does on this show.
Absolutely.
But my God, that monologue at the beginning where he's giving the eulogy for his father and stuff like that. I mean, I felt that was such an important and powerful look inside of him as a character, to whereas every action that he sort of taken throughout the course of the show made even more sense and clicked a little bit more. I will also say there was a part of me that for a while was like, maybe there's no credit, maybe there's no opening titles for this, and this just goes on for the entirety of the show, and it's just this one flashback, and then maybe at the end they cut to something. I don't know. I felt like that could have gone that way, but knowing that it is a cable television show, I was like, okay, well, they got to cut somewhere. If this was like a straight streaming show, I genuinely feel like that scene could have gone on for like, and maybe not him in the church, but just like, I don't know, him doing the eulogy and then following him into another section. It's like, and then we get all this, basically the information that they convey in the episode through that flashback until maybe like the last 5 or 10 minutes or so. I don't know. That would have been a jaw dropping, to say the least, for this show. But then again, you got to take into account that it is a cable television show and there are commercial breaks. But yeah, I don't know. I absolutely loved this opening so much, and it beautifully set the stage for everything else that would happen in the episode, because we get the title sequence and then we go into Vic and her dad going to rescue Wayne, and they get to the the graveyard of cars and all that stuff like that, and they see Bing, and Chris just loses it. I mean, he goes primal, and in a lot of ways his actions really hinder Vic from continuing on to save Wayne in that moment. He kind of cuts back the time, and it just shows he's unstable, in a lot of ways.
You know what? I might have to disagree. You didn't actually give an opinion on that, but just, I think you're talking about that to praise that specific part. Yeah. I had felt that we haven't seen this Chris in this time period, whatever you want to call it, this season. We haven't seen that kind of Chris. And I was a little disappointed because it seemed like it was very much a little forced to be a plot device so that the rift between he and Vic was created, so that she was upset because obviously they lost time because Bing had to go to the hospital and all this, in order to create that kind of interaction. I think they could have done that a different way and still stuck with the continuity of the characters. Okay. Vic was the one that went off on Bing. They probably don't want to do that too much with that character to make her.
Which is probably why they went with Chris. But it showed, I feel like, because they showed the flashback and then they went into that moment and then he loses it and we see a darker side of him. We see a lot of that old Chris start to resurface. Right. And sort of like the issues with him as a father, and the rift between him and Vic. Yeah. That's been there the whole season, whether or not it's the focal point or not, it has been there. We see that start to kind of come to fruition. I think that was probably the right move. You're right. They could have done it in a myriad of ways, but well, it's just interesting because to me, the episode only seemed like a setup, and here we go with the spoiler, but it seemed like the entirety of the episode was merely a setup to have this impactful moment at the end of the show. And to spoil, like, we're jumping ahead, but Chris dies. Sure. And the fact is, it was impactful. It would have been impactful, though, if they had done things, just tweaked it a little bit. So it just seemed like a little out of character for this season. And I think I really enjoyed this season. And you're absolutely right. We've praised Evan every chance we get. Every time he's in an episode, we go, God, that scene was so good. And he's just, he's amazing. He can really convey on the inside of a character, and this character specifically. So, it's tragic nonetheless, because I think he's been one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite actor of this show, the entire 2-season run. Right. And so it was impactful, but the episode felt like they could have given possibly a better tribute. I like the flashbacks because, as you mentioned, it shows so much of his pain and where this comes from, where his alcoholism probably comes from. I don't know why I made that 2 words, alcoholism. The cycle of abuse possibly as well.
all this kind of stuff, the darkness within him. But was it a justification really to give Manx a reason to kill him? Because he even brings up his father and says, "You're nothing but a drunk and a disappointment." I would have much rather maybe it was kind of even an inner reflection throughout the episode rather than things he did to really disappoint Vic. So it's just one of those interesting things because, thematically, I think the motif of the episode was definitely about parents disappointing their children, because as much as we've had in the previous 2 episodes, parents trying to protect their children. We talked about that in our last recap show. This one was very much about kids realizing at times their parents really screw up, and that kind of adulthood that comes with it. Because we also had that scene with Millie and Vic. Yeah. And how
which by the way, I don't mean to cut you off, and I want you to continue on that, but I loved that moment because it was probably some of the most like Peter Pan-esque like material I think we've gotten. Yeah. But like, obviously the reverse Peter Pan, not like legitimately all that. And so I thought that was like a really nice way of framing it.
Right. And once again, the young actress who plays Millie has really impressed me this season as well. Yeah. And I kind of like when you're dressed up like she is, with the teeth and everything, and you can still play a very thoughtful child, the innocence of youth, and yet the experience, the fact that she's lived for decades and hasn't aged. I just really like that dynamic. So yeah, it was just really interesting. The episode overall, I would say, was very solid in terms of performance, and a surprising episode, which I like, because the show doesn't always surprise me, at least positively. And that's not to say I don't enjoy the show. I just mean that sometimes when I'm surprised, I'm disappointed with what the characters are doing. And I talked about it, like Wayne saving the day and pressing the button to save Manx. You kind of go, "Oh, come on, kid," So you got to throw that in to carry on the plot, obviously. But so this was just full of some really neat surprises. And it's one of those episodes, like I said, you have to kind of watch the whole thing in order to appreciate the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think, what I would have loved, and I don't know if they necessarily had the time to do this, I would have loved, and you were talking about, maybe paying a little bit more tribute to Chris in this episode and whatnot. He's definitely a key player and a focal point, but I almost feel like maybe, had the episode been like solely narrated by Eben, and it kind of went through his life and the mistakes that he made. It started off with the eulogy, and then it moved to another phase in his life where he just screwed up, and then it moved to something else, and it kind of like it chronicled his life and the mistakes that he made while he was like reflecting on it. And then by the end of the episode, we kind of get to him at a place where he then goes to help Vic save Wayne, and we cut out like the I don't know, maybe there's a part where they integrate, kind of similar to episode 2, where we cut away from that stuff and they go get the information from Bing or whatnot, because that was a key important part that I don't want to gloss over. And then like by the end of that episode, they finally arrive at the confrontation, and that's where it sort of ends. And then the next episode, maybe he dies at the beginning, and then we kind of continue into where they're going there. I don't know. I felt like there needed to be maybe a little bit more like I don't know, like episode 2 was solely focused on Manx, and I think that was really important.
Yeah.
This episode, maybe had it been solely a Chris-centric episode, it was completely Chris and like what he had sort of done, and they really utilized those flashbacks. I don't know. That to me maybe would have made the death a little more powerful, but again, that's not to say that it wasn't powerful, because it was, and it was really heartbreaking and tragic and all that. And I think at the whole, this episode is really solid. But I don't know. I guess I just maybe me personally, I just wanted a little bit more of Chris and seeing, what he's done throughout the course of his life. I guess it's not necessary because we have season 1. We have like the mistakes he's made there, and so we kind of get the gist that that's sort of been a trend. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the more the merrier, so to speak. The more Chris, the better. The more Eben, the better, I think. He's not the lead of the show, so I guess in a sense they didn't want to give too much time. But you're absolutely right. I think any opportunity you have to use an actor like that, sure, why not? Yeah, and it's one of those things that, again, we've discussed the future of this show. If they were certain they were going to get a third season, or if they knew that when they wrote this episode, you can kind of pace it out a little bit more. It's just interesting because, you look at the episode itself and there's the subplot with Bing. There's the subplot with Tabitha and Maggie. There's the subplot with Millie. And then there's the main plot with the flashbacks of Chris. So there's a lot going on in this episode. Yeah. And it seemed to me like they were either tying off loose ends or untying knots to create loose ends to kind of give us a bit of a cliffhanger in the last two episodes. But also just kind of tidying up storylines so that we know that 9 and 10 will predominantly be about the confrontation and probably, and I'm guessing it now, the ultimate rescue of Wayne. So it's one of those episodes you could have shifted it. I think if I were to be upset at anything, I would be upset at, maybe episode 4 and 5, where we were very much indifferent about the episodes, where I think it was definitely 5 where I just said, oh my gosh, this one, as much as it was action packed, I was like, it didn't really do anything. It didn't evolve the story or anything. So and you were kinder on it than I was. I wasn't really a fan of it. Yeah. And 4 did the same thing. So it's just one of those things. Like, I mean, obviously we're not expert writers. We're not even close. Filmmakers ourselves. And so it's one of those things like, we have experience with this kind of stuff, but it's just hard for the writer's room to do. But now as much as I mentioned, you have to look back at the whole episode to appreciate the whole episode. I also look at the whole season and I go, you could have spared about 20 minutes of this one and shifted the story, anyways, it's one of those things. So, but I have a question for you, because we have talked about many things in this show, including what the future holds for Bing. So how did that pay off for you ultimately? Yeah, that was interesting, because literally last week we were talking about, how obviously we were like, okay, well, he's probably going to have some sort of redemption arc. What does that look like? And I think the way they did it was right. I mean, like they basically boiled down Bing's motives to the fact that he, obviously abusive upbringing and whatnot, but he was looking for a friend. He was looking for a sense of belonging. And it's like those classic like childhood sort of like insecurities and fears that he never really got over, paired with the trauma. So it's like, and we've always sort of understood that, but like hearing him sort of like admit that, I don't know. I feel like you have to, I guess, empathize with him to some extent, slightly. Slightly. Yeah. I mean, they do such a good job, because it's like he could be a sympathetic character, but he's not, because he is through and through a rapist. Like, he is a murderer. He is not a good person. We understand maybe why he did those things, and he's trying to rationalize it in his head. And he's like, listen, I want to wipe the slate clean. I want to go back to us being friends, Vic, of like talking about, whatever. And she's like, yeah, that'd be great if you weren't the monster that you were, And I love that she never flat out forgave him, because that would have been such a distasteful conclusion to that. Just basically saying like, oh, it's okay, Bing. All right, it's okay that you killed all these people, you abducted children, you raped parents. No, it's okay. I forgive you because you gave me what I needed to save my son. It would be such a selfish forgiveness on Vic's part, and we know she's better than that. So I'm so happy that she just kind of left him hanging like that, because that's very true. And it's actually really funny, because last night I was watching the final episode of the Michelle McNamara Golden State Killer docuseries on HBO called I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
And in the final episode, they're talking about the killer, and they interviewed some of his relatives and family members, and they were talking about how it's like, oh, we knew him as this, and it was like really great, and it was like I loved like all this stuff he did, and then they brought up the fact, and then obviously they started touching on the fact that he was this horrendous rapist and killer, and they were saying, it's like, I didn't know that, and it's when you hear those kind of things, it's like, I believe one of his cousins was even saying, who like lived with him, he was like, I thank you for the memories that we did have, but I can't ever look at you or look at you the same way or forgive you.
Right.
I hope, and the cousin put it this way. She was like, I hope that you at one point you actually did care and love me, or care for me and love me. Because I just can't look at you the same way. You're a completely different person.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, that kind of tied into that encounter with Vic and Bing. I mean, it's like, I thank you for the good memories we had. Obviously, I like that we could have been there, but I can't forgive you, and I can't look at you as the same person because you're a monster.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess we'll see in terms of character redemptions how far all of this goes, because we didn't get Ghost Dad, we didn't get any Craig this episode. So I was gonna say, we know that in this universe death isn't necessarily death, because we've seen Ghost Mom, we've seen Ghost Craig, we've seen
right.
I'm hoping,
and the key here is Manx killed him,
right?
So
there's something he could come up, we could still have like an Obi-Wan Kenobi Chris, just wearing the long brown robes, and
especially with Wayne, and maybe Wayne's able to, like, when he understands his powers, maybe he's able to come up with a way to like let Vic in on what he's doing and be like, hey, look, because you're a strong creative, look, look, you can commune with your dad and your dead lover and all that stuff, it's I don't know. It's true. He might not be dead. I think he is, and I think that's probably I mean, maybe he'll pop up similarly to how Craig popped up, but I would like to think that he is. His arc feels pretty played out,
right?
Like, I don't know what else they could do with it, and I feel like in this episode, it really was sort of the ending thing. I mean, like, he admitted his faults. Vic reluctantly like forgave him for whatever just happened, and I feel like, I guess I just don't know what else they could do without them sort of recycling the same thing.
I really just worry that if they bring him back, because again, the rules of this universe, when we've seen Ghost Craig, he's all burnt up. When we see Millie's mom, she's all kind of American Werewolf in Paris. What the hell's that? In London? What? I'm thinking about the terrible sequel.
Werewolf in London.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of the sequel first. But you know what I mean? I hope that if we do see Ghost Chris, it's not like some prosthetic where his head is twisted, or we see, just like some death becomes her kind of like.
He just probably won't have legs, or he won't be able to use his legs because he had you remember the wraith ran over his legs, and so he'll just be like, he'll wheel himself out in a wheelchair and just be like, "Hiya, Vic."
No. Oh, now I really hope he is dead. I hope there is nothing left.
We don't. Yeah, we can't. No, we can't have any more of that
at all.
No, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I guess what did you kind of think of the Bing stuff? Because we didn't get your thoughts on it, I guess.
Well, we know it's not finished. We know his story's not finished at all. We don't know if he's going to play a part in this season at all at this point, which, also seems like a nice, tidy ending. If the show goes off the air at the end of the second season, to me, that was enough, right? That was just enough where there's closure. We know justice is served. I like the ending that you had talked about, and the fact that Vic didn't say, yeah, I forgive you, because he doesn't necessarily need it. I also like, we had talked about this a few episodes ago about, if there is redemption for this character, that it's not going to be that kind of stereotypical, like he saves Wayne right at the last minute and then he gets shot and he's like, I did good, you know, and then dies, right? So
the Arnold thumbs up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy with it because I enjoy the parts of the show that are grounded, even though it's a fantastical show. And that includes, you know, these performances and what these characters can do with kind of extraordinary characters. So yeah, it seemed like a really good fit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that like it's a good conclusion if the show happens to go off the air on season at the end of season 2, because I think that I felt the same way about that as I did with the Tabitha stuff. I mean, I feel like there's so much more that they could have explored there. But it was like she got the information out of Bing, basically, you know, the stuff that harkened back to season 1 where she was the person assigned to this case. She's finally brought him to justice. And she came to terms with the fact that maybe her and Maggie just aren't meant to be because they want two different things. And she realizes that she can't ask Maggie to change who she is as a person. Now, we have 2 episodes left and they could still, you know, iron that out and flesh that out a little bit more, especially because looking at the thumbnail for next week's episode, it looks like Maggie is going to play a key part in what's happening in the showdown in Christmas Land. Again, just looking at the thumbnail on my screener here, I have no idea. But so I don't know. Maybe that story arc isn't done yet. But again, even if it is, yeah, it would feel a little light and pointless. But I don't know. I guess because of the work they did in episode 6, I would be okay with it.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you use those 2 words, light and pointless, because that's how I describe the entire subplot of their relationship. It just never clicked for me. It didn't matter. It was just an interesting dynamic to begin with, putting the 2 of them together, just because I found like Tabitha could have been a great character on her own. So the pairings don't necessarily need to happen, right? You know, like we didn't need another couple in the show, or we didn't need Tabitha to be a love interest necessarily to show love for Maggie or concern, or, you know, like just, so to me, it was, I don't know, anytime there was stuff about the relationship, I always thought the same thing, which is, okay, well, what are they going to do with this? And if it was more developed, then I would care. And it seems harsh, but it just, you know, the subplots sometimes fall to the background of shows and sometimes they don't work out. So you're right. It could lead to some sort of reunion and maybe they'll work things out. And, you know, I get the impression that with Maggie being the thumbnail, she's probably going to die next episode.
Do you think that's possible though?
I do. Because we've talked about this before, and this is what made this episode such a great payoff for me, because we've talked about accountability. We've talked about the consequences, like things really mattering. Anyways,
things really mattering.
Yes, things that should matter. So it was just funny that it took this long to really get one of those episodes. Craig dying, we talked about it as well, that at the time Craig had kind of similar faults in his arc and his development, that I wasn't quite invested when he died. So to me, it wasn't that impactful. And so this was, you know, with Chris dying, Chris has made a difference in the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right? 100%.
So
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So with Maggie, if she could be next episode, because we're on episode 9. Yeah. There's been no word of the show being renewed. So who knows? And quite frankly, you know, the writer's room and JB O'Brien, they have a better idea of what their future might hold. Not that they necessarily know things are going to be cut off, but at the same time, they might get an impression, or they might have been told by AMC, okay, you get another 10 episodes. Let's see what you can do. So I would kind of enjoy that, because Maggie has had a great season, I think, as well. Yeah. And we talked about the Hourglass being obviously the highlight of her character for this entire 2-season run. So again, to me, it was like, if she goes next episode, again, it'll be impactful because she made a difference, because she kind of finally matters a little bit more than just a guidance character, or somebody who will give answers once in a while. So yeah, if she dies, I think, quite frankly, if anybody dies in the next episode, it's impactful. Yeah. So that's a great setup from the writers, that they've done this, that I'm invested in the characters that are there. I'm kind of glad that Tabitha probably won't play a part in the conclusion, because she would be the easy go-to character if somebody else would die.
Yeah.
And
again, listen, Mike, she might show up. She might catch a plane and show up in the middle of nowhere and like jump in front of a bullet and be like, and then
she'll give the thumbs up. Exactly.
And then she'll give the thumbs up. No, for sure. That's a good point. And I could see it happening. I don't know. When you start getting into theories about deaths, it gets like, well, okay, they've killed one made player off this season. Did we see it coming? Yes, right. But also, like, is there room for another? Who knows? Right. And yeah, you get into other stakes. Well, and then the other thing is, if it's renewed for a third season, and you kill off Maggie, who would probably be like a more important player than she ever would be in a third season, I don't know. Does that mean there is no third season? I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah, because we've already gotten to the point, and we've discussed this as well in previous recaps, that, I think part of the fun of this show now is that they've covered pretty much all they need to cover from the book. And they're starting to expand the universe a little bit more. And we've always talked about, the Parnassus would be really interesting if we see characters.
That's the show, man. The
exactly,
Parnassus.
Right? Yeah. Hourglass, which is an original character that Joe Hill introduced before the second season. He said, hey, write about this guy. Most interesting character this season, right? Where everybody's intrigued and we want to know more about him. So yeah, you could do anything with other, powerful creatives, and it doesn't have to be Maggie. And I just like the fact that she definitely got a shot more than anything, but I think it's a guess at this point. But the fact is, I was like, you can't kill Lou because he can't kill another father figure. They've done that enough.
I feel like that would just be sort of like beating a dead horse. I mean, granted, he's got his own issues where it's like he doesn't feel like he's good enough for Vic. Yeah. And although I feel like
seemed genuine, didn't it, between the two of them, right? Because when Vic takes off and says, "I'm going to get my boy," or I'm going to go get our boy, and he says, "I love you," and she says, "I love you back." There was no hesitation, right?
Yeah, and that's actually what I was about to. So I meant to kind of backtrack on that, because it was like that was his issue at the beginning of the season. I feel like he sort of overcome that, and if he were to die, it would just be like, he'd basically be just cannon fodder.
Yeah.
It's kind of pointless. So yeah, I don't know. Maggie's the one that makes sense, but that is if someone is going to die. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's why we've got 2 more episodes to enjoy. Guys, before we give our closing thoughts here, again, be sure to like this video, share with your NOS4A2 friends, and let us know down in the comment section what your thoughts on this week's episode are. Did Chris's death really break you? Did you cry? Did you shed a single tear? We want to hear all about it down in the comment section below. All right, Mike, final closing thoughts on the episode.
I was just getting my single tear ready. There we go.
Oh, okay, perfect.
You can't even see it.
You can't see it. It just looks like his face is wet. That's all that's all it is.
Yes.
Like, oh.
Okay, final thoughts. Yeah, just an interesting episode in terms of development, which I always talk about. And more importantly, it was an episode where you really had to wait for the payoff. But that has been the show overall, I would say, more often than not. So I'm glad there was a payoff, and I'm glad it meant something, and I'm glad there was development for these characters. So it's just one of those interesting episodes where it's really hard to get into, and then you get into it. And the intrigue is there, right? You're definitely intrigued about, some of the things that they're talking about or spending time on in the show, like we had said, that opening sequence. But overall, it was just like it was a good development episode. And I haven't said that about their slower developmental episodes where they're gradually pushing the plot forward. There's no real action, but who needs that all the time. So it was just one of those like, okay, it's going to be another one of those episodes. And I was prepared that the entire 45 minutes was going to be slow. And then it wasn't. And a lot of things happen. And so, yeah, I think it's one of those well-balanced episodes once again, right? You just have to be patient for it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that's a great way of putting it, where like the previous two episodes kind of had a quicker pace, and they had more just like overtly interesting things going on. This definitely took a step back there, really took its time, but still managed to be interesting and really found it struck that perfect balance. I would also say that it feels like within the past 3 episodes, the show has really matured. You know, it doesn't feel, and you know, maybe purposefully so, because the characters have gotten older and stuff like that. But these past 3 episodes in particular are just very. It's what, you know, what we used to criticize the show for. It feels like they've really sort of just like brushed that aside and honed in on the characters without being, you know, I don't know. We always talk about it. Sometimes the show doesn't quite hit the mark. It just comes just shy of reaching that certain level of maturity, and of quality and excellence.
Yeah.
These past 3 episodes really feel like they have nailed that like 100% completely. And honestly, the first 2 episodes as well. There was like a little bit of a derailment there in the middle of the season, but for the most part, they're really impressing me just with how they're balancing things and writing these characters and concluding arcs and structuring the show. And I feel like it's finally found its stride. Yeah. You know, it really is confident in what it wants to be. And it's backing it up. And so like, it's, you know, on one hand, I can't see it going for too much, the show going for too much longer past the season. But on the other hand, I'm like, you know, the show really has it's gotten all the kinks. It's worked out all the kinks and whatnot. And it's found itself. So I kind of want to see more of that now that it's confident in its voice and whatnot. And again, this episode is another great example of that. So I absolutely loved it. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this recap of NOS4A2 Season 2, Episode 8. Thank you all so much for tuning in week in and week out. We really appreciate it. Before we let you go, Mike, where can everyone find you?
As usual, you can find me on all the major Real School with 2 E's, especially on YouTube, but Instagram, Twitter, and my Facebook group as well.
Yep, giving that thumbs up while he falls into a pit of lava. No, yeah, definitely go give him a follow. We got some great stuff coming up on the FilmSpeak channel. Some interviews, some really great interviews coming up that Mike has a hand in. So you're definitely going to want to stick around for that. But as always, guys, you can like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter just by searching FilmSpeak. And lastly, guys, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode, and we will catch you back next week. Take care.